Well, welcome everyone. Hi, I am Curt Covert. I'm the owner of Smirk Dagger Games, and this is Smirky Inside. We are going to be looking at a bunch of the games that we have currently in development, and we're working on 5 to 6 games concurrently right now. So it's a lot, but we want to take some time and actually open the door and let you peek behind the scenes at just one of those designs today, and that is going to be Hex Decks. Joining me today, I also have Jonathan, Melody, and Greg, who are the designers of Hex Decks, and they're going to help me kind of walk through and talk about what's new, what's exciting, and how it all kind of came to be. So, first, for those who may not have heard it in the name, there's hold on a second. Hex Decks is it does in fact have a shared lineage with my very first game ever, which was Hex. Now, that is a game that came out in 2003, believe it or not, and it has been in constant print ever since then. Though it's been in lots of different iterations. So it started with a very small box about this big. It moved on in 2014 to this XL version, which added a whole bunch of new wrinkles. And quite honestly, I thought it might have run its course. But these fine three folks kind of surprised me. Now, you likely recognize them from all of our conventions. These are members of my Instigator team, and all of a sudden, they let me know that they were working on a special project together, and it was a completely new and different way to play Hex. And quite honestly, now that I'm deeply involved in it, it's much more than that. It is safe to say that this is a very different game that still brings all the fun of Hex, but adds a whole new layer of strategy that did not exist before. So, Melody, I want to kind of throw it over to you because you were actually instrumental in the development of what this was going to be. So, talk to me a little bit about this.
So I was playing a lot of board games with a new friend who was part of my board gaming circle, and they just love deck builders, and they're just like, I like deck builders are my favorite, and I'm just thinking man, how could I get them into a Smirk Dagger game, because that's how I operate all the time. And then I'm like, man, wouldn't it be cool to make one of the Smirk Dagger games a deck builder? Which one would work for that? And then it of course hit me, Hex would make an amazing deck builder. How would you turn Hex into a deck builder? And so, because the nature of the game is you are playing cards and you're dealing a new hand every round, but how would you want that to operate if you are building your own deck every round? And so I kind of started thinking about it in my head, and then I was like, you know who I need to talk to about this? Jonathan. That's who I need to talk to about this, and that's what I need to do. And so I really just one line pitched it at him, like, Jonathan, Hex as a deck builder. And he's like, yes.
So for people who may not know this game, this game we always talked about as the wickedly fun stab a friend in the back card game, and really, when you boil it right down, it's like a madcap, chaotic game of curse, counter curse. You're changing the nature of the hex, you're multiplying it, you're sending them in multiple directions, and finally someone's not going to be able to deflect that hex away from themselves. That's when they're hexed, that's when the points are exchanged. It's almost like a game of magical hot potato. You can almost think about it like if this were Hogwarts, we'd be in the room of requirement practicing spells, casting them at each other, and bouncing them from player to player until finally someone gets hit. So, all right. So now, Melody, you've ended up talking with Jonathan. From what there?
We literally, the first thing we did is we took all the cards from the original Hex and like, well, what do we have? And how would that work? And we're like, okay, well, I think we want some way to buy, so that's our craft. And we really just were like, okay, well, let's start at the base and see what we can do to grow from there. And figure out how to play it. So yeah, that's pretty much where we started, Jonathan. Do you have any other?
Yep. Well, yeah, I think we had an argument about how you would buy cards, and we're just like, let's just go the simplest way we can. And then it worked, and it worked really well. And we're like, good choice on our part. And then,
well, so guys, I now have played this a number of times with you, and started getting involved in some of the design aspects as it's gotten tighter and tighter. But one of the things, and I think Greg, you mentioned this first. One of the things that we started sensing was that this was both hex and distinctly not hex. And I think that's an important distinction to make, because certainly people who know hex will be familiar with a lot of the concepts of, hexes being passed around and duplicating, that sort of thing. But it's a lot more strategic. It's a little bit less of a party game at this point. In fact, I think the hex card may in fact be missing from this game. So that's a lot of the things that made it feel more party style have been replaced with kind of strategy and deck building. And that's kind of interesting. So how did you guys figure to balance some of that?
Well, I think we wanted to keep, the chaos. In fact, we love the chaos. We mentioned that this is a chaos card. We need it in here. We need it in here now. But part of that was kind of like we needed to look at kind of, strategies that people played hex with, right? The people who loved, we have Wyatt, who's like, oh, is it a Maddening Compulsion? I am very happy it is in my hand. And then Greg with double and thrice, very nice. I'm going to play that one, and I'm going to do this kind of thing, right? Where we knew that there were the cards and the styles that people wanted to play, and then how could we kind of make that fun and easily repeatable because now they're in your deck, and you get to do that again and again and again, and have it be fun without it being overwhelming.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things I think that we've kind of discovered as we've gone on is that the game, I think, is going to end up being different enough that we really have to kind of push things both visually as far as they've gone mechanically. So, this game, when it was originally developed, let's say it kind of looked cool for its time, but certainly it feels of the age that it was created in 03. But now we've really decided to push it further. So the cover is not going to look like traditional hex, and nor will the cards. So, this, by the way, is not final art, but it gives you a sense for kind of where we're going. The original game was very minimalistic in its look, but it was also very heavy on wording. And so we're both enhancing the look of the cards and making them look more modern, but at the same time, we are trying to reduce the amount of words, because as you start looking through these cards, being able to quickly grasp, what they do is going to be pretty paramount. Let's see. Naomi's very nice. So she writes, awesome to see this. Hex was one of my first games I ever played at one of my first game meetups. Oh, that's great. Well, we're hoping that a lot of people feel that way and kind of get into this as a really a whole new way to play. So,
well, if we want to go over what the card looks like now too, we can kind of do that too.
Sure.
Right? Because people are going to notice the big differences. One, there's the hex with the movement icon. So across the table means across the table, but also you still get your options in a 5 or 6 player game. There's a lovely background, but the thing you're going to notice is that the craft value in the upper left corner, people familiar with deck builders will know that's the value you get when you normally would play the card. And for us, it's discarding the card gives you the craft. And the cost on the bottom right corner is what it costs to put that card, to acquire that card.
Right. So craft being buying power, and cost being what it takes to put it into your hand.
Right, which is one thing where I think we should bring up now, because you just mentioned it, where one of the things this does differently as a deck builder is it throws immediately in your hand. You don't purchase it and put it in your discard and have it kind of become an engine you see later. Any card you buy is immediately going to be able to be used, which helps with the buying, because then you're like, ooh, I spent it on this, but now it's mine. I get to use it right now. And you get to have that kind of joy of buying a cool chaotic card or a good card that's going to deflect or stab someone in the back, and you get to do it and then use it right away.
Right. So this is then the conjuring row. And so we have a massive deck of cards now. You start with just 10, right? Some of the basic passes. Yep. And then the idea is that by discarding a card, one or more cards out of your hand, you end up this value here, the one in the top corner, that's a point that you can now use to go ahead and purchase something from that conjuring row. So and I'm sorry, continue on.
Well, no, and it's interesting because I think, Mel, we really wanted to make sure that there was a lot of interesting cards in there too, because we talked about, you had that big thing where you wanted to make sure we limited the amount of kind of basic lefts and rights that were in there. I mean, because they're useful, but they're not as interesting. So you want to talk about that kind of thought that went into that too?
Yeah. So I had played it with the original friend who was the deck builder friend, and one of their comments was, I feel like in Conjurer's Row, we're getting a lot of those turn aside lefts, turn aside rights, and it makes for a boring round. Yeah. And that I took really to heart, and it was really something I was thinking about a lot, and how I love when there's interesting cards in the deck. I always love buying just something that's like, ooh, this is going to be good. This is going to be fun. And I wanted there to always to be something that someone's like, oh, no, I want to buy this. I want to buy it like this. And so I definitely had like that was kind of my, not necessarily a hill to die on, but that was definitely my, like,
your flag, 100% flag. It was a Mel flag, waving it very strongly.
I don't want so many basic cards in here, because the fun of this game is like, ooh, what interesting card is coming up next? Yeah. And if it's just going to be something that we already know and are really familiar with, that turn aside left, turn aside right, deflect across, it just doesn't feel like it is as interesting or intriguing to be like, what's in Conjurer's Row now? And so that kind of pushed us a little bit to create a little bit more and go, all right, that is the comment that we've been getting from a lot of our play tests. Let's find a way to make more interesting cards that do more interesting things. Yeah. And we've definitely done that. We've definitely like gone, all right, let's make it interesting. And it's been so fun to like look at all the new cards that like when I come up and where it's like, all right, let's open the document. Oh man, Greg has like all these cards, and Jonathan has all these new cards, and like, what does this one do? Oh my God, that's so cool. I'm gonna love that one. And there's just been so many new, really fun cards that are that when you finish a game, you're gonna want to flip over the rest of the deck and be like, what else is in here? Yeah. And what else is going on? What other cards do we have?
Because Melody, when you first brought that up, I think there was initially some pushback with the team. Yes. And then I think Jonathan and also Greg, you're like, okay, well, so long as we still have turn aside something, maybe we can just add a little nugget that makes it a little bit more interesting, right? Has a slightly different effect, but now there's a reason to go and buy it. And I think that was a nice moment there.
Right. Well, because one of the things that we had and we found that was enjoyable was that there was always that, oh, I'm going to buy this little left and like screw the person over here because I can, right? Or use it as a defensive thing. But one of the other benefits that Mel had for pushing that too was that once the game gets going, you're less likely to get that hand of just basic cards.
Yeah.
Right. Because we do have some cards that thin your deck, but they're not as absolutely critical as saying some other ones where you get a mitt full of, well, these are all 5 starting cards.
Yeah.
Because, and even then you're going to be like, okay, great, I'm going to discard that to buy something way more interesting in here and put it in my hand.
Yeah. And one of the things that I thought was fascinating about this game, and I think really separates it from a lot of deck builders, is this instant buy on the fly that this game has. Now, Hex has always been a little chaotic. And so I think the idea of buying something, put it into the discard, and having to wait till it shuffles back in, where hopefully you see it, that doesn't happen in this game. And in fact, there are 2 different times and ways that you can put cards into your deck. So, Greg, can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so every time that a hex appears in front of you, before you respond to the hex, you will get to purchase from Conjurer's Row using the craft from your hand. So you can discard a card from your hand, and whatever the craft value is, it allows you to purchase from Conjurer's Row. That card will go directly into your hand, so you can use it right away if you want, or you can hold it onto it for a further round. And then that card spot that now disappeared will get refreshed with a new card from top. Mm-hmm. And what that allows is you only get that one purchase, per response. And, as basically when the hand finally finishes, whatever cards you have left in your hand, you can then discard them to gather another card for the start of the next round. So that one will show up on the top of your deck, and then you'll deal yourself your standard 5 cards that you start with of the round, and you'll get to use that card right away. So no matter when you purchase it, you'll get to start with a card you purchase, so you don't have to wait like 10 minutes or however long it'll take you to get through that card, and it won't be wasted because you'll have it right away. So
that's cool. Now, the other thing that I can see down here at the bottom of the screen, it says Rupture and Surges. Jonathan, can you walk me through what we're looking at here?
Right. Okay. So one of the things that happened at Gen Con Online is we ran a lot of play tests there, and it was a very earlier version of the game, and it doesn't look anything like it does now. But one of the things that came up is we didn't have an ending. Per se. We didn't have a mechanic that it was just kind of you played 3 rounds and you were done, which was kind of predictable. And in a game of chaos, that's not really kind of the ending that you want. And so there were some suggestions on what to do. And one of the ones that kind of came out of it that we kind of adapted to this was that because you're basically playing with the primal forces of magics to throw pranks at each other, to throw little bombs at each other. Of course, what happens is that magical nature fights back. So you'll put these Ruptures and Surges into the deck, and as you reveal cards in Conjurer's Row, if you reveal a Rupture or a Surge, it'll start to signal towards the end of the game. Once 5 of them have placed, then the next hand is the final hand. But Surges come out, and it's like a surge of magic, and so there's this big time effect that may give everyone a hex, or may cause people to discard or cause people to lose willpower. Like there's just going to be a big effect, and then it's done. But Ruptures are kind of more permanent, so they're all associated with spots on Conjurer's Row, and when a Rupture's in play, whenever anyone buys from that spot on Conjurer's Row, it triggers that Rupture. So it could do something where like the person who's in last place gains a point. Right. Or it could, a lot of them is there to kind of help bridge the gap between first and last place. So that person may be able to conjure, or other people have to discard, or something happens because you dug into that space where the Rupture is to get some magic. And now there's the effect. And it was really successful in this. And so we've got some permanent effects, some one-time effects, and you don't know when they're coming, so they're always a surprise, and it's always like, oh god, what's happening now? And then you deal with it, and then you kind of move on to the rest of the game. It was a really good way to end the game
And that's really because when 5 eventually come out, it's like a timer for the game. When the 5th one comes out, you finish that hand, and basically that wraps the game.
No, one more. You get one more after that,
Oh,
right?
you want more? Okay,
You
yeah.
want more after that, yeah. So
but
you put it out, you're like, oh, what's going on? Yeah.
But what I thought strategically, what was interesting, particularly with the ruptures, is let's say a rupture came out and it got dropped right below this boost, for example. That's how you know it's associated with that particular card. Now, if someone went to buy boost and put it in their hand, that causes that rupture to happen, and it can be triggered again and again. So now, if that's not going to benefit you, but if it's benefiting someone else, I have to think about, well, is buying that boost really worth it for me?
Right.
Very often it is, but someone else might benefit from it as well. And I thought that was a really interesting game balance thing to work with.
Well, and also if you're in last place, you have tons of benefit to be like, okay, what can I do to benefit me beyond just getting a card? I can be like, oh, I'll buy this card, discard this other one, and draw 2. And so now you have this extra card advantage over everybody, but because you're the lost, you're in last place. And maybe that'll help you catch up, maybe it won't, but it's still this kind of thing where you can kind of also play the ruptures to see what other benefits you can get for yourself.
So there was a question in the chat about does the row fill up and stuff as they take it? So after, like, if of the 4 of us were playing and I would purchase a card from that row, it would instantly get refilled, and the next person who also has a hex would get to buy as well.
Right, and if one of those cards flipped over was a rupture or a surge, it would drop below that card slot or the next available one, and then automatically be refilled above it in the card row.
Yeah, there's always 5 in here. We always wanted to make sure there was always 5 cards to be buying. We always, and even then, to keep things flowing at the end of a hand. So so when Greg was talking about it, when you're the intended, when the hex is in front of you, that's called conjuring. At the end, when there's no more hexes and you discard your hand, that's called gathering. And at the end, and when everyone gets together, those 5 cards go away and 5 more cards come out. So there's never a point in time where no one wants to buy anything, so the cards kind of stagnate. They're not interesting, so the cards kind of stagnate. They're always moving and they're always cycling through, which again can trigger more surges and more ruptures.
Yeah,
and there's ways to get rid of those cards in the center too, with card powers and things like that.
So let's talk a little bit about the cards, because one of the things, at least for people who know Hex, all the cards used to look exactly the same, and now we can see there are different color categories for cards. Now, this is something that I think we decided was going to make a lot of sense, because now you have to identify cards from across the table, and making things as clear as possible, as quickly as possible, is pretty key. So this gives you a quick heads up on what type of a card we're dealing with. So there are, of course, the standard basic hexes, and mostly these are just passing the hex from player to player. Sometimes it has specialized rules that are more clarified, but otherwise it's really just an icon that tells you who's going to be able to be targeted. And again, it's got the craft at the top and the cost down at the bottom right. A lot of people's favorite cards in the game have always been these enhanced hexes. And in Hex, when you enhance a hex, it goes with an extra power that continues until it finally explodes on someone. And they can stack up even. But you end up adding a cardboard token to the hex stack. These cards now show you which of those tokens to add to this stack and tells you the effect. Now, Jonathan, there is another piece of information on this card now. So let's talk about what it is and why it is.
Okay, so there was something that came out during the playtesting, and it's a good reason why you playtest with other people.
Yes.
We like backstabbing. As a
group,
as a family, we like backstabbing. And so what happens is we would just buy these cards because we're like, yeah, I'm going to play rot. And then we played with someone who did not have that and was very kind of like mathing it out. And I believe they said, I would never buy that card. There's no benefit. It has just as much chance to affect me as it does to affect other people. Why would I buy it?
Yeah.
And that was a very valid point. We started playtesting for a bit with the potato. That was our joke, is that, if I just do a basic thing rather than ridiculous things, how does that affect me and what's going on?
Right.
And
can I win by doing very little?
Very little.
Yeah.
And it did come out that way a little bit too often. And so what we decided to do is we decided to make those cards worth something. So that number in the bottom left corner is the amount of we're calling it willpower now. Hex Decks players will know it as voice, but it's your points. And so what happens is that those go into your deck and you count them up at the end of the game and add them to your willpower. So yes, rot may affect you, but it's also worth 3 points in your deck. Right? So that's the benefit for deciding to buy it. It's going to be worth more at the end for you, hopefully, than you will lose from rot. Or again, if it affects multiple people, then you're getting an extra benefit from it. So yeah, the idea is with a lot of these enhanced hexes, a lot of the cards that cause chaos and that can affect you just as much as everyone else, you'll notice they'll have that value in the bottom left corner, and then those will give you a benefit when they're in your deck.
Right. So up until that point, there were very few cards that would actually be counted at the end. You would still just like check how many points you gained and lost during the game, and that would be it.
Actually, on top of that, remember, we had it where you buy it and you immediately got the gain, so people could see. Right? People could see, and then all of a sudden you bought it and you're in the lead and everyone would attack you and you'd be like, oh no, I'm in the, oh no. But now it's hidden information at the end.
Yes, that's true.
And it adds that other little element of, oh, wait, I remember you're close, but you've bought all these cards and they're going to have this huge impact. So maybe we should target you, but I don't know for sure because I have to watch what you're playing. And because it's so chaotic, you can't. There's just too much to really be on top of it like that, and so it's a good way to surprise win and come out with some extra victory, and puts in that chaos that we all love from Hex onto the table.
Yeah, and now Hutch, I know you're wondering about colorblind and whether we'll be having additional design changes. I think the answer is yes. These are kind of temporary designs. I'm probably going to bring in an official illustrator to make these really nice. And then I think the actual border might change as well. But the truth is, it really doesn't matter. It's a nice visual guide, but you don't lose anything necessarily by being able to distinguish the card types. It's an enhanced quick read, but it's not a critical game element.
Right. And on top of that too, if you're, oh, sorry, go ahead, Mel.
Oh, I was just saying, and also Greg is colorblind. So we do run stuff past him to be like, hey, as our representative of the colorblind crowd, what do you think about this color thing? So we do try to make sure that when we have a design choice, we're like, hey, what visually do you see? And right.
Yeah. And on top of that, even with these ones right now, they tend to have their own distinct styling. So if you go back one.
Oh, sure.
Right? Only the enhanced hex have the hex icon in the middle.
That's true.
Right? The hex cards have the hex symbol on it, right? So there is, I mean, again, final will have, be more encompassing, but even right now, there's still plenty of ways to differentiate the cards between each other because of the iconography that they have. Yeah.
So, for example, with the charms, now, again, for players who know Hex Decks, these were always the, as soon as you get them in your hand, play them immediately. That's what that symbol on the left actually indicates. And then some have ongoing effects, and that's kind of the infinity symbol over on the right. But interestingly, these cards, once they get played, if they had craft in that top left corner, they could also be added to your final purchase for the hand as you gather cards. In addition to what's in your hand, anything that you played that is one of these cards, a charm, could actually be used for that buying as well. Mm-hmm. And of course, what would it be Hex Decks without these nasty curse cards, the hexed cards, really? So let's talk a little bit about the next thing that is kind of new to these cards, by the way, is, well, originally, you can't play these cards until a hex actually hits you. If you can't move the hex away from you, that's the only time that you can play these, is when you have to eat a hex. Now, sometimes that is terrible, like with Curse. Sometimes that is great, and instead of losing points, you're going to gain them. That is still true here, but obviously no one wants to buy a Curse because it's terrible. It's a horrible card. You don't want this card. But we have made it worth 3 points towards your end game that hopefully people will forget about, and maybe you won't get hit when you hold it in your hand. On top of that, there's some other nice sweetening things. So Jonathan, up in the top corner.
Right. So the craft for there is 2. So it itself is worth more. Like, you pay 1 and get 2 if you get to keep it to the end. But it's got this thing called binding. Because in this game, when you discard cards for craft, if you get to buy Curse and just get to discard it whenever you want to get a benefit, you'll never have it detonate on you.
Right.
It's a risk. So you can't discard it until the end. So you hope you don't get hit with it, but it's worth more, and it's worth a lot of points. And it kind of is that risk reward kind of element, which is why if you look at something like Left is Best, one, it costs a lot more because it will help you. And its craft is -1. So at the end of the hand, it's a detriment to you buying an extra card at the end because it's defensive. Right. And you'll notice that a lot of those defensive cards, for the most part, have negative craft because that's the trade-off. I'm protecting myself, but I'm now less able to kind of empower my deck to do more things.
Yeah, and it's been really interesting as we've been working on these cards together. We keep on adjusting those values, seeing, why is someone buying this card or why is someone not buying this card? And tweaking all of those values has been, I think, one of the most compelling things about this redesign.
We definitely started with some of them having much higher values based on our own personal values until we adjusted it with that potato player of why would I buy this? And we're like, you'd buy this because chaos. And it's like, yeah, but chaos doesn't actually
win you anything.
And it's like, oh, I guess that's true. And so adjusting the values based on how much will this benefit me to winning the game and what strategy can I employ to utilize this card changed how we valued the craft and the cost of some of these cards. And that was really interesting. Like, one of my favorite cards is an original from Hex Decks, is Double and Thrice, and it doubles the hex and sends them back, and it's ridiculous, and I love it, and it's totally chaos, and it's blown up on me so many times. But I still buy it every time. But it has zero actual strategic benefit, which is why we gave it a willpower bonus. Because otherwise, more logical thinking players who didn't want to just cause chaos wouldn't buy it. And so trying to make it where it's more compelling has been definitely really interesting.
Yeah. And of course, there are still a few disrupts. These are the interrupt cards. The classic ones, Stun and Null, are, of course, here. There are some new ones also, but these don't actually pass the hex. This is what you do to other players to slow them down a bit or cancel their plays. Now, all the cards that we've actually seen up to this point, by and large, were in various versions of the original game. But I can tell you that this team has put together like 60 or more new cards that are, using these new mechanics as levers and dialing up the interesting things. Gather Bane, which you can see a portion of, is one of our favorites.
Yes.
Because it allows you to pass the hex and you move it to the left. But then you take this card and you put it into the player's hand on your right. And it starts going around the table being passed along. And you think, well, that's a good thing because I can pass the hex with it. Sure. But if the hand ends and you have this in your hand, it kills your ability to buy a card at the end because it's a -4. So you cannot gather when you end up stuck with this thing. And there are all kinds of interesting new mechanics that have come up with all these new levers to play with. So talk to me about some of this.
See, you hit me with my Gatherbane. I loved Gatherbane. When we first played it, we laughed and laughed and laughed. Because it's like, you get it now. No, you get it now. No, you get it. And it takes intention to do that, because it never meets, right? You have to like intentionally kind of make it do that thing where the card goes around the table. So that was, I think, one of my favorites that we did. I think another favorite for me that just I love Greed, because Greed is that defensive card that when you play it, everyone's like, I have to get rid of it. I have to do something with it. It changes the board, because what it says is that when you are the intended, gain
you're
a
the target of the hex. Yeah.
Yeah. When you're the target of the hex, when someone passes it to you, you gain a voice. So you're like, oh, well, thank you. Boop. And I'll just pass it over here. Oh, you passed it back to me? Boop. You just kind of keep doing that. And everyone's looking at you like, I gotta get it to blow up on you, but I keep passing it to you, and you keep getting more victory points. This is the worst.
Yeah, and now, Greg, one of your cards is also on this screen.
Oh,
Tell us about the cedar.
Okay. Yeah. So cedar was a concept I had that basically, when you pass a hex with the cedar token on it, and it lands in front of another player, as soon as it stops there, it seeds out a new hex. And so it's a standard basic one. And so basically every time it passes, it spawns a new hex. So continuously, it just gets crazy and fun. And I love this card to no end.
We are still arguing about this card, just so you know.
Yes, I know.
This may or may not actually be in the game.
By far, it is one of my favorite cards, just because of, you go from being like, oh, we're passing one hex, and then before you know it, there's 5, 6, and depending on how people respond to it, depends on if it keeps going. So it's just a really fun and chaotic card. But there's a lot of ways to mitigate stuff if you have the right cards, but if not, there's going to be a lot of willpower loss on that round.
No, it does say that cedar can't be duplicated, so we can't have a cedar making a cedar.
Yeah.
But we have been able to, like, we've had it where it's like, oh, there's a double and thrice going around, which is these bigger, badder hexes, and then this one's boosted, and then all of a sudden, just like all of these hexes that have appeared on the board because of cedar are now worse.
Yeah.
And it's fantastic.
Yeah. Well, I mean, sufficient to say that there are a lot of cards right now that are in the game, and quite honestly, some of them may fall out, some of them may rise to be our favorites. We're going to find out. And quite honestly, we'd love to invite you, our viewing audience, to go ahead and help us determine some of that. We are actually doing ongoing play testing, and we're doing it in Tabletop Simulator. If you have access to Tabletop Simulator, we're going to be running certain playtest events. So I'm going to put a link here in the chat.
There was a question asked about what the player count is. Currently, the max player count is 6 players.
Yeah.
It's from 3 to 6.
Yep. But in any case, over at the Envoy Gateway, envoygateway.com, there is a calendar. It's free to join. We are posting different play sessions up in that area. I put 2 for tomorrow night, actually, one at 8 Eastern and one at 10. But we'll be adding more as well. And when we do, we'll announce those on Facebook and our other social channels. But if you are interested in helping us play through some of these cards and decide what we love and what needs a tweak and everything else, we encourage you to come and play with us. Even if you just want to kind of get a taste for what this game is and why it is different. I have to say, it's very interesting having a game that I developed, my very first game in 2003.
18 years ago.
Oh my God.
This game is now an adult.
Yeah.
It's now an adult.
I love it.
And to not only have you guys get inspired enough with this, ancient game to have thought of a new wrinkle, and Curse You made it even better, I think, than it was. It's both heartwarming, it's exciting. I'm delighted by where this game is going, and so we don't have like a release date. This is something that's kind of ongoing and developing, and we hope you'll be a part of it and come and play it with us. So with that, any final thoughts, guys?
There was 2 thoughts from the chat. One, poking fun at Jonathan a little bit. How many times does Jonathan have to get hit with his Gather Bane before he flips the table in Tabletop Simulator?
Never. It is never. I will laugh and laugh every time someone plays a Gather Bane. I will laugh.
Yes. And the other more serious question was, please have a YouTube playthrough as well.
Oh yes, we will. Absolutely.
So.
Yeah, we have one of the older versions. I think Curt, were they put on YouTube at all, or no? Or are they just on the Twitch?
I think they are on YouTube, but no, we will do it again because so much.
Oh yeah, it's so different.
Yeah.
I appreciate Eric's comment. I don't think he ever will. He'll just laugh and pull a worse trick on you.
And that is true. Well, so here's the thing. One of the things that I have enjoyed in our play testing is I have seen various strategies start popping up, and everyone's, at least in our groups, tends to have a different play style. I mean, Greg, any card that allows Greg to draw more cards, he is in hardcore on adding cards to his hand, which of course,
draw protection.
Yeah. And that's a protective measure, because if you have no cards, you're a sitting duck. Yep. Jonathan, like any way that he can sow either discord or chaos, he's all in. She's complicated. Melody is very much a player that tries to keep all quiet and don't notice me, and then, oh yeah, boom, eat that.
Oh, you forgot I had this super fun thing in my deck.
Yeah.
Surprise!
I am super surprised because obviously I had a huge love of backstabbing. Why would I have created this company if I did not? But my play style tends to be, I'm going for protection, and I don't get it.
Super defensive. I don't understand why.
I don't get it. It doesn't make sense to me. But
the main reason is because everybody, when they play with you, they feel comfortable to attack you compared to everyone else.
No, so you're right about that.
You do get attacked a lot.
Well, hey, it even made us change ward, right?
Yeah,
ward now moves around the table as well after you use it. So
yeah. Well, and that's honestly the difference. The original game gave you, everyone had equal access to the cards, and it's just whatever you got dealt that hand, that's what you played. Now that you are essentially,
you're more in control. Yeah,
you're honing a deck with a given strategy in mind, and if you had a super power card like Ward, where it would just stay with you and keep you safe for a turn, it was too powerful to give that as an ongoing power to someone. So now it's a card that moves around the table. And so a lot of these kind of things became clear as we move forward in the design. So in any case, all right, guys, thank you so much for being part of this. We are definitely going to be doing this again. As I mentioned, we've got a good 5 to 6 games we're working on. So I'll bring those designers on as well. And we're not done here. We're going to be back with Hex Decks as well as we continue to develop it.
There is a question. Fritz wants to know how big the new deck will be. We don't know. We have made smaller than it is now. We have shoved all sorts of cards into it that we know we need to cut it and bring it down to get only the ones that are really, really good and really, really effective and really, really fun. But right now, I think if we added all the cards that Greg, I think, put in, it would be about 200 or something
It'd
in
be
the size of the
ridiculous.
die. It's yeah. Currently, it's way too big. We're in the process of like thinning it out.
I think comfortably is probably 150.
Yeah.
That's probably where it'll end up. But
Yeah, say there's a lot of stuff that we're like refining and merging ideas and stuff to make. We're not trying to remove cards. We're trying to make the cards that we have better.
I am.
Well, yeah, we're trying to make them, you know, as good as possible so that nobody's like, oh, that's a bad card. Like every card we want to be interesting and enjoyable to play with. So no matter what comes up on that Conjurer's Row, you're excited to see something that you might want to buy.
all right. Well, we are going to be doing more and more of these. So go ahead, like, subscribe down below. Put a comment on any time because we'll go ahead and answer those comments as well. And we look forward to seeing you on the next Smirky Inside. So long, everybody.
Bye.